Let's go.
Welcome, everyone, to the captive audience. It is the 30th of October. There are only 6 days left. Actually, 6 days and 1 hour and 57 minutes till ballots technically are due in this state. And my suggestion is you vote now. Beat the Tuesday rush next week. Uh, get that ballot in there. Make it easier for all of the folks that are trying to turn out votes that we know are going to go for the candidates we suspect are going to go for the candidates that are going to um, restore our country and save it from Kamala Harris and the radical leftists. But make it easier for them by getting it in there early and not risking that somebody, you or somebody might forget. And with me tonight is Don Anderson. We don't get to be on too much, Don, so this is a special treat. I think it's been probably a couple months since we got to do a show together, and Sonny wasn't able to join tonight, so it's you and me.
What an amazing time to get to do one too. Can you believe we're within 7 days of the most consequential election probably since 1860? It's amazing.
It is going to determine the direction of the country from here forward, and it's either down or up, really. And last night we had pollster Mike Riley on and talked about what the polls are showing us, and I'm optimistic, but I don't think there's any way to take anything for granted. And in Oregon, we are unlikely to tip the balance in the presidential race as a state. We should be glad there's electoral college, because if it wasn't for that, Oregon wouldn't matter at all. People don't realize that, but and same goes to some extent for Washington State. If there was no electoral college, they just go to like the 15 largest metro areas in the country, and they would just campaign there and promise some stuff, and that would be it. And everybody else would just be ruled over by these mostly coastal elite areas, and we will be heard. But in this election cycle, chances are Kamala Harris is going to win Oregon's electoral votes. However, we do have races here in Oregon that we have to win, and they are at the federal level. They're congressional races. There's 3 of them. Districts 5, 6, and 4. And those races are considered very close and will determine the outcome of the House of Representatives at the federal level. And so if you're in one of those districts, there's Lori Chavez DeRemer is the 5th District Congressional Representative. She's got Janelle Bynum, the far left person, competing with her. And it's a real contrast there. Janelle Bynum is supporting the Measure 110, police defunding, a lot of stuff that, frankly, has brought the state to its knees, and certainly in the Portland area. And then District 6 is Mike Erickson. It's a rematch between him and Andreas Salinas, who's the incumbent, who narrowly won by just 6,000 votes in 2022. And then there's in the 4th District, Monique Despain is taking on the eminently corrupt incumbent Val Hoyle, career politician, who is under federal investigation for a pay-to-play scheme with everyone's favorite corrupt cannabis company, LaModa, that brought down Shemia Fagan, the Secretary of State. So there's a lot happening at that level. And then there's an AG race, Attorney General race. Will Lathrop has a very good chance of beating Dan Rayfield. And that would help us have law and order in the state and fight the cartels and all the crap that's happening to our state, instead of have somebody who just lets it happen. And then there's a Secretary of State's race. There's a Treasurer's race. So there's a lot going on. But why don't we start with the national level first? The big news is that all of you, certainly everybody watching this program, and most anybody that you know who might tend to agree with you politically, has been called by the President of the United States the absent-minded individual in chief, Joe Biden, you've been called garbage. He was attempting to push back on an unfortunate joke told by a comedian in Madison Square Garden, I guess prior to the rally that took place. And then, of course, the media immediately tried to attribute that to the Trump campaign. They're like, we don't know who this guy is and has nothing to do with us. About Puerto Rico, saying it was an island of floating garbage or something like that. Anyway, terrible thing to say. It was a bad joke that didn't work, obviously. But then Joe Biden tried to respond to that by branding all Trump supporters, so 71 million people, as garbage. And and now the Harris campaign is in damage control mode, trying to separate themselves from the guy that is technically still running the country. He was sidelined. He was actually put someplace so that he wouldn't interfere with the campaign anymore, because he was just a reminder to everyone of what a disaster the last 3.5 years has been. And guess what? Now they're trying to explain why the president of the United States, who, by the way, answered questions from an ice cream shop. Have they not understood how bad the optics look, having this guy show up in an ice cream shop and stuff ice cream in his face as he answers questions? He should go to the senior living facility where it doesn't matter what he says. He can talk to a bunch of other people that don't know what they're saying and eat ice cream.
Well, it's absolutely stunning when you think about that. He is the president. It's so easy for us to forget. They buried him so deep, we've forgotten he's the president. Whenever you ever seen a campaign where the sitting president is still in the basement? And the thing is, he did best when he was in the basement. When they put him out there in the debate with Trump, he was already tanking based on the results they were getting. That just accelerated it. So when they took him out, things actually got better for them until they put in another candidate who arguably was worse than him. I mean, at least in the case of Biden, you could say that the guy was losing his mind, which he clearly is, but she doesn't have one to begin with. I mean, even if you take away the fact that she's got that their policies are bad, the results are horrible, just in terms of platform skills for a candidate, I honestly have never seen anybody that bad. And that's not hyperbole. I don't care what office you're talking about. I've never seen someone with such bad platform skills. The teleprompter stops and she's standing there literally waiting for it to turn back on. Ask her a question and she repeats the same thing every time. It's always, I came from middle class background. I've never seen anything so horrendous in my life. And the regular citizen, at least the thinking citizen's got to be sitting there thinking to myself, this person's going to sit across the table from Putin, from Xi, from any of the world leaders. Are you kidding me?
Eventually,
wow.
They're not going to. If she were to be president, they're not going to put her in front of those people. She is going to send someone else, because even she will have to admit she's a disaster at some point. But she hasn't admitted that yet. She can't, because you can't win the election if you say you're a disaster.
Well, you look, she stayed in the basement herself until she had to come out. The poll number started to plummet. They kept trying to, paint this apple, put lipstick on this pig as long as they could. Then the shine started to wear off. She had to get out and speak. And when she did, it started plummeting, just like Biden. She does best when she's in the basement, but now she's in a position where she can't. And they know it. The only time they put her out is when it's super friendly, audiences like The View, or it's going to be some short 15 to 20 minute, it's never going to be long form, which is why she's avoiding Joe Rogan like the plague, and even tried to structure the whole thing with Rogan. Did you catch that? So she says she'll do it, but it has to be only 1 hour, and it has to be in DC, but not in Austin where he is, and not long form, because there's no way someone like her could survive a 3-hour conversation.
Well, she couldn't survive, but somebody said they didn't think anyone would tune in to her for 3 hours. I disagree. I think actually people would tune in just to see how bad it could be. It's like watching a disaster film unfold, and it would get worse and worse, and then she would at some point probably have to walk off the set, and it would be worth it. I'd actually consider that. Because all the stuff she's going to say, she's just talking points. She's just spin. There is no real person there.
And everything has been name calling. I mean, I don't watch much TV, but lately my mom is older, so I have to watch TV when I go visit her. And then when I watch college football, is the only sporting vice I allow myself. And every commercial is abortion, abortion, abortion. I hate Trump. Trump's racist. He's misogynist. He's sexist. That's everything. There's no talk about policies whatsoever. They'll talk about the wars. They'll talk about the border. They'll talk about inflation. They'll talk about interest rates. They'll talk about crime. None of the things that really matter to Americans are they talking about. There's no way you can win honestly, and we can get around to that in a moment, with that as your sales pitch. We know that about 33% of the population is nuts because 33% of the population watched the Biden debate and thought he was good. So I think that tells you everything you know. So 33% of the people are out of their mind, and there's no way you can do anything for them. So 65%.
And it doesn't matter what happens, they're going to say
that. Those people are sick. I mean, literally, there's something wrong with their minds.
Well,
the other 65%, that's what we got to work with, and that's where we have to win.
Well, so, and there was a response from former President Trump. He's in Green Bay, Wisconsin for a rally, and he showed up at the rally in a Trump-branded garbage truck, and as an homage to President Biden's recent statement. And he said, this truck is in honor of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And it had the Trump campaign logo and a slogan, as well as American and Trump flags. And so it's fully rebounded back on the Democrats because they were actually looking for something else to take the focus off of how badly Kamala's doing. And it lasted about 24 hours, and then they got right back at him. And they're trying now, Biden is saying the only garbage I see floating out there are his supporters. So this is reminiscent of the deplorables comment that contributed to Hillary Clinton's defeat.
That's Sanker.
In 2016.
Yeah. No, it's unbelievable. So what other business do you go to your customer that you're trying to sell, and you tell your customers they're deplorable? Only a left-wing ideologue could do something like that. Because but literally you have to understand, that's what progressives think of the rest of us. They think they're smarter and wiser, and everybody who's not thinking like them is stupid and an idiot. They have no respect for the regular American citizen. They think you're a stupid boob. And it slips out every now and then with like the deplorable comment was a classic example of that.
Well, and actually some of their antics from 2020 are getting exposed. There was actually a very recent big story that broke. There's actually two stories that are coming out of it. One is Catherine Herridge, who used to be, I think, mainly just a Fox News reporter, but used to do the Pentagon beat. She came out with some independent journalism that has exposed what the FBI was doing with regard to the Hunter Biden laptop and the big guy, which is Joe Biden, and these guys were told not to expose it, and they said they actually were able to confirm that they were told specifically, don't do this because of the impact they'll have on the election. So this is the FBI, people under orders at the FBI specifically trying to manipulate the 2020 election. And then the IRS agent who blew the whistle on the Biden family has now been given an ultimatum: accept a demotion or leave the IRS. So it was the FBI and then these IRS guys who were noticing all this stuff that, red flags about Biden and his family that's taken years to expose publicly as a result. And do you remember in late 2019, early 2020, when they were impeaching President Trump the first time, and they said, you can't do anything to a whistleblower. They are sacrosanct. It's an impeachable offense if you do anything to retaliate against a whistleblower. And they had their so-called whistleblowers, right? Who didn't really blow a whistle on anything. They just gave their opinions about what they thought of the president, and that was a whistleblower apparently. But they said they told news stations you couldn't even say the name of the person providing this information, who turned out to be totally later essentially a plant, or they were in the tank for the Bidens. There was even a connection between the guy that was the whistleblower and the Bidens. Well, now they've gone after Gary Shapley, whose testimony to Congress changed the course of the Biden family corruption case and actually helped result in Hunter Biden's felony convictions. The IRS, in a letter dated October 15th, was given 3 options for his future at the IRS: leave his post as a supervisory special agent in Chicago and accept a job as a senior analyst in Washington, which is a demotion, accept a pay cut and a demotion to criminal investigator, or resign/retire. This was given to his lawyer this week. That is the Biden administration and what they think of whistleblowers that blow the whistle on them.
Well, we all know that when it comes to principles, they don't have any. And when a law or something works to their advantage, they'll use it. When it doesn't, when it's good to be principled, they'll be principled. And when it doesn't help them, then they won't be principled. I think that's the first thing you have to understand about the left and how they work. You really do.
Yeah, none of it's based on principle. It's just based on who they can inflict what consequences on politically and gain some sort of advantage.
Yeah, so you have to ask, for example, the most recent thing, have you seen this, where all of these newspapers are suddenly not endorsing Kamala? And immediately you ask yourself, well, why is that? I mean, we're talking 200 major newspapers. We're talking newspapers like the Washington Post, LA Times, New York Times are suddenly not endorsing anyone. And what they're telling everyone is, well, it's unprincipled to endorse anyone because we want free and open elections. I suddenly realize that it's not, I think it's Jeff Bezos or whoever who owns it, that it's suddenly like, okay to, so it's better to have principles. And it makes sense. Then you ask yourself, given everything else that's going on, well, why is that? I mean, why now? Is it that this candidate is that bad, or we're that certain she's going to lose that we don't want to have egg on our faces? I mean, in the last week, they're saying this. It's pretty amazing.
Well, I posted the link to Catherine Herridge, the story that broke, as actually yesterday that broke. He said IRS whistleblowers involved in the Hunter Biden tax case revealed that IRS, DOJ, and FBI knew the laptop was, quote, real, unquote, immediately. And that means that they received it in 2019. So they knew immediately it was real. They said that prosecutors demanded that these IRS investigators not ask questions about Joe Biden ahead of the 2020 election. Joe Biden hadn't even won the nomination yet. So they were literally working to elevate Joe Biden and protect him going into 2020, even though he hadn't won the nomination yet. And these guys are doing something courageous because they're getting everything thrown at them, including this retaliation. This is actually one of the most important reasons for these guys to win, for the President Trump to win, and for us to hold on to the House and win the Senate. Because we actually have to run all of these people that cooperated and perpetrated this stuff, not only out of government, but we have to put them under oath. And then if they're perjuring themselves or covering up a crime, prosecute them to the full extent of the law. A bunch of them need to really go to jail, because you just can't do this stuff and constantly get away with it without doing permanent damage to the trust that people have in these institutions. And I don't even know if some of these institutions can be saved. I could see them saying that we got to start over. Because some of these entities, you can't, I mean, now everybody believes that they're being run by people, not everybody in them, but they're being run by people who are corrupt, who did this not just during the Biden administration, but during the Trump administration. They did this to Trump.
Well,
And
Trump
so
himself
I
said that
believe that these entities are worth investing any trust in.
Well, Trump himself said when asked that question, what was his biggest mistake? Was he was new to government. He's like, I think he's what? There's only what? I think he's the only president who hasn't been a general or hasn't been a politician or a lawyer. I'm pretty sure it was like 99% of them have fallen out of those two categories. So he walked into a monster he knew nothing about and had no. Yeah, he knew it was a swamp, but I don't think he understood the depth of the swamp. I don't think any of us did until he rattled the cage. And so he wound up selecting people that he thought were good people, and they were not. Maybe one of the biggest pluses of him coming back now, this might be the big blessing in disguise, is now he knows who to select and who not to select. And he didn't have that knowledge before. So this will make him vastly more effective, I think, this time around. And so should he win, and I think he will, I'm hugely optimistic about his ability to be effective given what he learned from the first time around.
By the way, I just wanted to announce that astronaut Buzz Aldrin has endorsed Donald Trump for president less than 1 week before the election. You know what? If somebody was still on the fence, a guy who actually went to the moon and came back, I would put more faith in him than any Hollywood celebrity. If somebody's on the fence still that is listening to this show, and by the way, there is another chunk of suspicious activity that needs to be investigated that will never be investigated if there are not Republicans in control of the House and eventually the executive branch, right? And it is Act Blue. Act Blue is an fundraising machinery of the Democrat Party. And they raise money for everything, including for people that are trying to help fund entities that get felons out of jail so they can be released on the streets and stuff like that. But they also are primary funding arm for candidates. And there's a formal subpoena of Act Blue by the House of Representatives so they can confirm. Well, apparently they've confirmed suspicious activities tied to Democrat fundraising. If you can cheat the entire system and get elected, then eventually no one's going to trust this system at all. The only way you restore trust is by accountability for the people doing it.
And here's a story. I don't know if many of you all have heard this story, and I think it's so illustrative of what we face. So Anna Kasparian, have you heard about this story yet? So she's a left-wing talk host podcaster. I've heard her a couple of times, and I mean like hard left. And so here's the experience that she had. So she's in Los Angeles, and she's walking her dog, and there's two homeless guys she notices on the street, and it's kind of dusky in the evening, and so she just doesn't notice them. She thinks they're non-threat. Now you got to ask yourself, only a liberal would walk into a situation like that. Two homeless-looking guys look like they've been tweaking. You're out there by yourself, good-looking woman, right? And you don't think the danger, the spidey senses don't come up, right?
Yeah.
So she continues to walk over there.
Those are the victims.
So those are victims.
Fear the victims,
But see, these people. So this is a case where a person becomes victimized by their own policies before they'll actually begin to change them. Without being too graphic, because I know it's a family show, she all of a sudden had one of these guys on top of her. Basically, well, he didn't fully rape her, but she was able to get away. And so she turns around and she goes back to her podcast and talks about how this happened to her and how dangerous it was to have these homeless people out there, which of course she wasn't concerned about that before. But here's the interesting piece. The interesting and fascinating piece is all of her left-wing people came after her for denouncing the homeless and being mean to the homeless. These people live in some kind of netherworld. And there's but at least in her case, she got punched in the face by reality. And maybe one of the best things that have happened with them stealing the election from Trump this last time around was all of those people who weren't paying attention and just listening to the left-wing media. They themselves got punched in the face by reality. So listen to some of these numbers. And I think this is a result of these numbers. So when you got homeless people living in your streets, when you have places like Springfield, Ohio happen to you, and literally they're eating cats and dogs. When you got Aurora, Colorado happen to you, and their Venezuelan gangs running through your apartment buildings. killings. When you let New York
Trende
City,
Alagua. Trende Alagua.
yeah, when you got that happening, you look at what's happening in New York City, where they're putting up in 4 and 5 star hotels illegals and not funding the veterans that are living in the streets. You see this happening in Chicago and LA when the crime is out of control. Now people they couldn't hear what we were saying. They had to get hit in the head. As a result of that, I just saw some of this data. Louis Farrakhan is backing Trump. Can you imagine?
Really?
Of the Nation of Islam is backing Trump. Hispanics are polling at 62% for Trump. The black vote in New York State is at 40% for Trump. I mean, these are like historic numbers. New Hampshire.
You did have influence, Don. You have moved a good portion of the country through your example and telling your story. You just give yourself some credit. You've been at this for a while here, and you said, watch people start to think the way I do.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that the logic couldn't hit them, but you had to see it happen to you, and before you make that change. I think the same thing's happening in Oregon and Portland. Look at how many more elections are now close there. I mean, I even saw some data that showed that Oregon was, like, in terms of Trump, Oregon as a state. Well, we know it's mostly the counties around the cities that are causing this, but Trump is within like 6 points in Oregon. Who would have ever thought that? Now, Washington and California are both crazy. They're still like 15, 20% spread. But that goes to show you get punched in the face hard enough, you got to rethink what you've been doing. And it's terrible that it had to happen, but it did.
Well, there used to be a saying years ago that a Republican is a Democrat that's been mugged. And and I think that hasn't changed any. I think I first heard it from somebody like 20 years ago, and the reality is there, and people who can kind of take leave of reality for some indefinite period of time can imagine. That's why you see that the people who are supporting Kamala Harris skew towards upper middle class, suburban white females, the ones who at this point in time still feel the effects of some of these policies the least out of the different demographic groups. And meanwhile, racial minorities, working class, people in areas that are experiencing the surging crime, homelessness, fentanyl use, they're done. They're starting to shift. That is what you are seeing. And then on top of that, the arrogance, like telling people that, if you don't vote for me, you aren't black. Remember Joe Biden said that? That didn't age well. That did not age well. And now people are really, this is engineering a huge political demographic shift that may well be very permanent, because there's nothing appealing now about the Democrat agenda for working class people.
And it took them what, 20 years to see it. They're probably 20 years behind. When you look at the big labor unions. I can't remember the last one. Was it the auto workers? Where the at the top of the food chain, they're not endorsing either way. Historically, they always endorse Democrat, but 65% of the workers were pro-Trump, because they finally see. I think what the Democrats have done is they permanently damaged themselves. And with regard to the black vote, it's very interesting. A lot of people don't realize this, but before the Great Depression, and Roosevelt came along with his, I forget the plan was called, Great Society. No, that was Johnson. But before Roosevelt came along in the 30s to fix that, blacks were like 95% Republican. And the reason was Lincoln was Republican. And it was Republicans literally who
freed the slaves.
Exactly.
Who was that
again? And people don't even
who passed the 14th Amendment.
People don't even know this stuff.
I know.
And so the Democrat Party, but they shifted in the 30s because of that, and it stayed that way. But it looks like what they've done has been so historically, well, it's anti-everyone, but it always hurts the minorities the worst. They're finally seeing it, and they're seeing that their neighborhoods are being destroyed first. And with regard to abortion, whose babies are being killed? Theirs are being killed the most, and it's strategic and on purpose. We talked about that before. Their neighborhoods are being destroyed the most first. They're going to get us all, but they're going to start with them. And they've finally wakened up, and they're seeing the light.
Well, what's interesting too is that I don't think it's just the people that are running the Democrat Party and at this point, much of the country at the national level that are they're the true fascists, but I don't think it's just them. I think there's a segment of the population that wants to silence the other part of the population and actually force them to say the things that they want them to say. It's a wholly un-American concept that used to be inconceivable for both sides of the political equation. But the Washington Post, by orders of Jeff Bezos, its owner, who bailed it out and saved the paper from folding entirely, decided they weren't going to endorse anybody. And it's not because he likes Trump. That's not the case. Now, you might be afraid of losing some business if for his companies if Trump wins. So maybe some people have said that was his reasoning, but what his personally stated reasons were is that it's clear that people don't trust the media anymore. So actually, he said it's counterproductive for them to endorse presidential candidates. Washington Post has lost 250,000 subscribers in like a couple of days because of their refusal to endorse presidential candidates. So now there's a whole bunch of people who read that paper and think that paper must do what they demand it to do. Yeah. It's one thing to endorse somebody they disagree with. I've heard of that. People unsubscribe from that. That's led to some papers not endorsing. But to refuse to endorse anybody and then be punished by people who claim to be your subscribers just says that there are a bunch of people out there amongst the population who think the same way Joe Biden does, that their fellow Americans are garbage, and that they have to be silenced, that they have to be forced to utter phrases the way they say they must be said. You must use these pronouns, Don, or you're just a bad person. And by the way, you'll be fired from your job after several complaints are filed. I can promise you won't be fired from Captive Audience because of that.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We have different policies here.
Yes, I like this
policy is just say what you really think.
Say what you think.
And then when accused of false opinion by a leftist, just say, you got me.
Yeah.
You got me.
Well, here's another spin to this whole thing I think you'll find fascinating. So you think about what's happened with the major media, CBS, NBC, ABC, MSNBC. They've been losing market share.
MSLSD.
MSLSD. They've been losing money hand over fist, right? Because of this stuff. On the other hand, what's happened is now you look at like the Rogan thing with podcasts. That podcast, I think I saw how many millions? Something like 75 million people have watched the Trump version of him just speaking, just two guys just speaking 3 hours. I think that is going to single-handedly finish the job of destroying traditional major media. Because Joe Rogan obviously isn't the only one. We've seen a number of other people have podcasts, well, like what we're doing right here. Long form, just talk, just citizens rapping. It's burying large media. So you don't trust that anymore. But guess what? Americans love alternatives, and now they've been given an alternative. And this is another one of the great things that's come out of this. The Twitter move might be one of the biggest things that's ever happened. And we've already, it's kind of already the rearview mirror, but now it's unleashed the freedom to speak. So they can't keep the rest of America from speaking to each other. But
let me tell you that we still need a government to defend the rights of these entities to do this, because I think that Elon Musk figured out at some point that if Kamala Harris gets to be president and the Democrats have control of the Senate and the House, they'll come after him.
Oh, absolutely.
And they'll try to say, they'll accuse him of all kinds of things that are harmful to society in order to deprive him of his freedoms and rights, and Twitter and everybody on it who he has freed from the grasp of the authoritarian left. And here's my proof. YouTube had put a block on an FBI whistleblower interview that was done with a Catholic group.
Mhm.
and the House of Representatives is investigating it. If it weren't for this controlling the House of Representatives by a mere 3 seats,
Yeah.
there would be no investigation. No one would be allowed to demand that people be held accountable for this type of activity, and that we figure out if maybe public policy has to be changed. Jim Jordan, the House Judiciary Committee chairman, on Monday expanded his investigation to the big tech censorship to include this blocking of a Catholic group's interview last month. And it was with the FBI whistleblower Marcus Allen. And Jordan sent a letter to the Google Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai, whose company owns YouTube, asking for all contacts between the tech giant and the federal government concerning Allen, because the suspicion is there, based on past behavior, that it was actually a collusion between the federal government and YouTube to silence this person on YouTube's platform. And they are saying that it appears that this was done because there was a misconduct at the FBI to prohibit this guy from expressing his deeply held religious beliefs. And that's something that no government agency is allowed to do. And then establishing that this is a pattern. This is, and the mistake they made, here's the mistake they made, YouTube. Marcus Allen, who is the witness, the FBI whistleblower, is a Marine. And one thing you aren't going to do is tell a Marine that he can't fight for his own freedom. You're just not going to do it. And so they picked the wrong guy, and he's fighting back. But because we have the House of Representatives, we're able to do it. Oh, yeah. We actually have to make sure that continues. That's why what's happening next Tuesday is super duper important. It is not just an election. It is not just choosing another set of people to run the same things and have the same things happen. This is actually this is the finger in the dike. This is holding back the flood of leftist authoritarianism that has been on the edge of engulfing our country for about 5 years now.
And not just us, the whole world is watching this, because the world realizes, at least the Western civilization realizes, that freedom is in the balance for the entire world, because as the United States goes, so goes everything else. And if you look at Western media, if you look at the news in Britain, the news in Germany, the news in the Netherlands, the news in all those, Sweden, Italy, they know more about this election than we do. I was talking to a friend who was talking to, I think it was a British national who had traveled over here. And this person knew everything they knew all of these things we're talking about right here, because they know where they are. They're ahead of us, by the way, in the totalitarianism of their countries. They are ahead of us. It's worse. And that's where this all goes if we don't put a stop to it. And this media control thing is one of the very first things every communist slave state does is they control the media. And that's just what they do, is take it over. The Russians have over the 2 papers that they had, Izvestia and Pravda. And that's all the news you got, completely government controlled. And you look at what the left has tried to do here. I believe, let's see, there's a lawsuit that's going to be coming up here pretty soon, where they're looking at breaking up Google and Meta and breaking these places apart into pieces. That would be like awesome. You think about the trust busting that happened under Theodore Roosevelt. Nothing screams for trust busting any more than these giant media conglomerates. You look at how they behaved. They need to be broken up. Small is a good thing.
Yeah, they haven't, and they're also trying to control the country. They're not just trying to control marketplaces.
No, it's not about that. It's not about that.
It's the political collusion more so than even the economic that is troublesome here. It's just they've leveraged a near monopoly in order to control what people are allowed to say. Be like if a company owned all of the streets in a town and they said, well, you know what? I don't like what you say, so I am not letting you drive anywhere on those streets. And you can't, by the way, I own all the phones. Imagine if AT&T, back when it was in the Ma Bell era, could go and say, I don't like what you're saying on the phone, So you can't use our phones.
Yeah. Well, that's essentially what they want to do. You look at Soros just acquired the Harris Biden administration just fast tracked their acquisition of like 200 radio stations. That should scare the heck out of you. They've been wanting to do that ever since the Rush Limbaugh era. They wanted to put a stop to all this conservative communication going on in radios. And now they're making their move to do exactly that. What do you think is going to happen to all of those conservative talk radio shows, which are the only ones that are successful, by the way? Every time they try to put a liberal on the radio, it just bombs. So we know what that's all about.
We do. And by the way, I like some of the comments we've got here. Lori said that she heard somebody say today, we need to take our country back by behaving like the third monkey in line to get on the ark. Pretty good. Yeah, like it really matters. Like you better step up, or it is the torrential flood for you. And then, there's what was the other comment here? Oh, Bobby said that they would strike if any one of us got canned.
We appreciate that, Bobby.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. We run it ourselves. Really, the real danger is that we'll get silenced by social media. And I know most of you guys are probably watching on Facebook, but we're on Twitter or X, and they aren't silencing us there. So at least for now. But yeah,
for now.
For now. And freedom is always one generation away from extinction. We are in that generation right now, and we've got to do with a generation that knows that's what's happening, should and must do. By the way, there's some other interesting things that have happened of national consequence, and also here in Oregon with our election system, and we should bring this to light if you don't mind. Election officials in Oregon have been registering self-confessed non-citizens to vote. 54 have been discovered. That's usually discovered by accident because these complaint-driven systems where you have to discover and catch somebody being a non-citizen, when the people running the election system are actively trying to register them, it's like impossible unless you do a full audit. The Public Interest Legal Foundation in California stated in their recent report that Alameda County election officials have been approving applications of non-citizens to vote. And they said the data obtained by the legal group showed that the earliest known year an illegal migrant being approved to vote in the country was 2004. So it's been going on for a long time. We know here in Oregon, actually, that they found 1,500 non-citizens are registered to vote. First, they found 306. Then they found 1,200, and then they kept looking, and they did an audit, and they got to 1,500. And then they decided to suspend the motor voter system at the DMV right before a registration deadline. I even came across some people in the 4th District that thought that they would be registered if they got their driver's license when they did. And I'm like, actually, maybe not. You might need to go to elections and tell them that you expected to be registered, and they might not get to vote because if they didn't do that before the 15th of October, it's too late. And that was a lot. That was 15 days ago now. So that's California. In Oregon, the thing that I mentioned about the 1,500 citizens, the DMV, the governor, and now we found out that Virginia found 1,600 possible non-citizens. They tried to remove them, and it turned into a federal court case, which the Supreme Court has now ruled Virginia will be allowed to remove non-citizens from the voter rolls. Some federal judge, Pinhead, at a lower level said that it was too late to do it.
Of course.
It's too late to have an accurate voter roll. We're not going to have that. And these are people confirmed non-citizens. They're convicting and indicting people. There's one in Michigan that they found had voted, 20 in Georgia, 6 in Ohio. And the thing is, these are just the ones they catch. So, and I guess the DMV administrator has almost resigned here in Oregon as her agency, the scandal engulfs the agency about registering non-citizens. And I can tell you, if those non-citizens were coming into the country and voting for Donald Trump, this would have been solved a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
I think
right.
it's very hard for the average conservative to really get their arms around the religious zeal with which the left is pursuing this kind of stuff. You ask yourself, while you're out there working, busting your butt, raising kids, paying taxes, doing all those good things, these people are doing this kind of stuff. And I had just a personal experience just a few hours ago that kind of I thought it'd be really useful to communicate to you all. So I'm getting on the freeway and I'm getting off into the neighborhood, not too far from my house. In fact, it was within the blocks of the ballot box that got blown up. Right, so that's where I am. And there's a car.
Are you talking about the ballot box that got had the fire?
The fire, the one in Vancouver.
Yeah, because the FBI, by the way, I was just going to mention, has launched an investigation into that. But I guess if this were to be too widespread, actually, it could really screw up the election, especially if they were completed ballots, right? Because then people wouldn't even know what happened to their vote.
Well, it's not a rational one. Because it's an area where the presidential race doesn't matter, right? You do have a congressional race here. That's I can't think of her name. Perez.
Is it District 3? Is it Joe Kent and
right.
Perez, Gluskamp Perez? Yeah,
Gluskamp, right. So that's of consequence. But the area where they did that is a purple area. So it's not like it's a red area. So it just appears to be like a an arson, chaos causing event. But here was the interesting piece to this little story I was going to tell you. So there's this car ahead of me, and it's got the little ticker tape, like electronic reader board going across the back. Oh, I wonder what that says. I know it's going to be something political. I get close, and what it says is, F you, Trump, F you, Trump, F you, Trump. Just continual stream. And there's a license, there's where the license plate should be. There's no license plate, but there's a plate that just says, F you, Trump. Now you think to yourself, what kind of an individual would drive around with that? Who is in that car? I mean, I would love to just talk to them. I can guess who or what that person is, but that's a sick mind. But that sick mind, they're pursuing religious zeal. Think of the same mindset of people who blow themselves up on airplanes overseas. It is a very similar mindset. That's who we're up against. So they never sleep. It's like
derangement syndrome, and
they're completely deranged.
Yeah,
it's like the evil eye of Mordor that never sleeps. We have to recognize that.
It is.
This is a fight.
And some of these folks at the federal level running things right now are wearing one of those rings, controlled by George Soros, I think, who I believe is actually what's his name from Mordor, but
Saruman.
Saruman. Yeah. Oh, that's Sauron. Saruman was the wizard. Yeah.
Right.
Sauron. Yeah. Sauron, Soros. Whoa, that's pretty close. Maybe Soros is Sauron in Hungarian. Anyway, there's a little bit of news I wanted to share before, because last night I hadn't seen these articles yet. And I spent a whole program talking to Mike Riley about polling, and it turns out there has been some polling on the measures that are appearing on the ballot here in Oregon. And I thought I would share that with you. There's two stories. One is a little bit more to the point than the other. The Oregonian story kind of goes into more detail. The Oregon Catalyst is kind of gives you the treetop. So there's a very liberal group called the Northwest Progressive Institute that did some polling, and they said that Measure 115, the impeachment power resolution or measure, is likely to pass with 53% to 24%, though there are still 22% unsure, and about half the people are saying yes or sort of probably and not sure. Measure 116, this legislative pay commission thing, that one appears to be 49% yes, 26% no. The rest are not sure, but that's probably going to go down. That's probably going to get approved, for better or worse. Ranked choice voting is one that should have everybody concerned, because I just showed last night what the ranked choice ballot looks like. A regular ballot just has ovals that you fill in, you choose one, right? This is the ranked choice voting for Portland mayor, and that's what it looks like. And you have to choose. You have to choose 6, or you neutralize your vote at some point. So even though I kind of know who I want to vote for, I have to choose 6, and I have to choose the other 5 from amongst this morass of people that there's some of them don't even have voter pamphlet statements. I have no idea who they are. There's this nonpartisan. They could be Antifa. It's a mess, and it's going to delay people's ballots. But that's ranked choice voting. And it's very close. The yes vote, according to this poll, is 41%. The no is 40%. And there's the single largest donation to any campaign in Oregon history took place, and it was a pro ranked choice voting group in Virginia has donated $7.5 million to try and sell people on this before.
How are they selling that? I wonder what benefit could you sell for doing
I don't
that?
know. I haven't seen the ads for it, but I guess if you are a target for this, you can expect to see it in the next week. It is Measure 117 is the Measure 110 of the election system. It's going to be that bad, and people are going to have just as much regret that they ever did it. And want to repeal it 2 years from now. In fact, the repeal movement can start literally the day after it would pass. So hopefully the not sure 20% have not been lobotomized and they will vote no. That would be what I'd urge them. Measure 118, the $2 billion tax on sales, the 3% tax on corporate sales that will just turn into at least 3% inflation for everyone instantly. And give $1,600 of free money, apparently, from companies that are going to leave the state or never come here. That one appears to be going down to defeat. It says 54% no, 29% yes. And then Measure 119, which hardly matters, about cannabis unions and censoring business owners. That one is getting a yes because people don't understand it. They hear union and they figure, why not? That's the problem with these measures, is that the ballot title just doesn't tell you what the consequences are, and there's no campaign.
And that's all on purpose too. It's confusion. It's like every shyster knows the harder it is to understand the message, the more likely you're going to rip somebody off.
Oh yeah.
And the whole thing is this voting thing. If you can't understand it, then don't buy it.
By the way, if you're unsure about Measure 115, the impeachment thing, because some people are saying no, I'm saying yes. The threshold is 2/3 in both houses so the state house and state senate. So it's higher than the federal impeachment threshold, which is a simple majority in the House. And I do think that if you are to be an effective governor, you do actually have to maintain the support of 2/3 of each house of the legislature. There's potential abuses, and that could fall back on, like with the Democrats doing too much impeachment in 2019, 2020. It could backlash on you. But this argument here that was made in the Oregon Catalyst is that recalls aren't substitutions for impeachment, because recalls, which you tried twice in 2019 and 2020 in Oregon, have the highest threshold. It's harder to get a recall on the ballot than it is to pass a constitutional amendment and get that on the ballot. And so I believe that because of the 2/3 threshold, people should consider voting a yes on that. And I remember when John Kitzhaber mercifully decided to resign when he was probably going to face a recall. That would have worked because he resigned because of corruption, right? He tried to destroy evidence in a federal case and got the Democrats worried enough that a recall got them to tell him, you better resign, or we may just find a way to make you go. But he didn't have to, because we are one of 50 states, only one of 50 states that does not have the ability to impeach and remove a statewide office holder. So, but I did also want to mention one other thing in the polling. There's polling in the Attorney General's race. Will Lathrop and Dan Rayfield. Dan Rayfield, the Democrat machine incumbent with no experience in criminal law at all, has a 46% support. Will Lathrop, 41%. It is within the polls' margin of error. And there's also the possibility, I think the strong possibility, that people in a place like Multnomah County feel differently about law and order than they did 4 years ago.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
It's, support Will, vote for him, give him money. We could pull this one over the finish line. It said that in the case of the Secretary of State's race, Tobias Reed, they put him at 44%, Dennis Linthicum at 38%. And so that's actually pretty close, considering that 38 is what you do in a race where you just get Republicans and conservatives. And then Elizabeth Steiner, treasurer, 42%, Brian Boquist, 38%, 4% for the Working Families Pacific Green Party candidate. And so that is only a 4% margin. And this could be a big deal. So when we talk about whether your vote matters, better step up, because you might be saying we never win, boo hoo hoo. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in some races that we can win.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, you got to fight. What other choice do we have? It's not like you can go someplace and run and hide. I mean, I've had friends say, I'm going to run and hide, move to this state, move to that state. And some of them have. But you know what? They're coming after you. At some point, you got to put down your buckets and fight where you are, because they're coming.
Well, and when have you ever got more of something you wanted by doing nothing about it?
Never happens.
It doesn't. It's like saying I'm going to win the lottery, but I'm not going to buy a ticket. You're not going to win the lottery. Okay. This is not happening. So, and by the way, a telltale sign, there was an article here that says new demographic study shows net migration to Oregon has plummeted. As recently as 2016, Oregon ranks second in the nation in net migration coming in. Last year, in just 8 years, we now rank 45th.
Wow.
And that 45th is in roughly the same range that our school graduation rate is. And it's slightly better than where we are in terms of addiction and mental health facilities in the state of Oregon, where we are number one in fentanyl and meth in the country, addiction and deaths. So it's all tracking. This is what happens if we just let it happen, is that we end up with this. That is quite a stark result, is to dive that much. There is one other state that we appear to be racing to the bottom to match, and that is California. California is slightly lower than us, but we dove more in a shorter period of time than they did. They were never as high as we were in terms of net migration, because they've been shedding people for a decade.
Well, the thing is, the people from California fled here. That's why it started later here.
They came here, and then people were like, I'm out of here. Yeah, that's right.
And then voted for the same crap that destroyed the state they left, which is typically what they do. They're like locusts. They take a beautiful state. Probably the Disneyland of the planet was California. The greatest place in the world to live was the United States.
That is where Disneyland is.
And the greatest place in the United States to live was California. And that was just a fact. Until probably the late 90s, early 2000s, that was a fact. They used to say it all the time. If California were a country, it'd be the 7th largest GNP in the world. When you think of California, what's not amazing? You got beaches, you got mountains, you got Hollywood, you got entertainment. I mean, you got everything.
They had to do something from stopping all of that being too good, and so then they created the Democrat Party.
The Democrat Party, and they became a one-party state, and that's what Oregon became. So both of these states,
That'll learn them.
Both states became one-party states, and this is what happens when you have a one-party state. Yeah.
And you know what else is a sign of what happened to California is that the greatest president to come from that state, and one of the greatest in American history, Ronald Reagan, had a movie made about him. And the companies based there in California censored the information about people even knowing that this movie was in theaters.
Yeah. What can you say?
What could be wrong with the state? Well, that's a wrap. That's a wrap, Don. We hit the haiku, and we have completed the picture for all.
Well, you all got your money's worth tonight. An hour and 3 minutes. That's
right.
Pretty amazing.
Yep, we delivered, I hope, and I hope all of you share this with others that need to see and hear this information. Bobby's checking out deserted islands. Yeah, there might be an island of trash in the Pacific somewhere. You might have to check that out.
Well, it
might have less trash in it than places in Portland. Actually.
How much more are we going to know 7 days from now than we know now? It's just crazy.
Well, so for the next 7 days, vote if you haven't. Encourage others to vote. Help them know how to vote by sending them this show and talking to them. Contribute to a candidate, because I can tell you, knowing the inside story on how candidate campaigns work, they're usually running on fumes right now, because if they're a real campaign, they're spending it all. And if they can keep spending and keep their message in front of people all the way to the end, then they can be victorious. And then you can actually have a different and better country, a saved country. And then do keep praying, actually. I think one of the candidates I just heard the other day, who has kind of a long shot in Eugene, is running against state rep down there. And Corey Burkett is running against Lively, I think John Lively. Anyway, Corey said what they asked him, what's the first thing you're going to do after you win this race? And he goes, fall to my knees and thank the Lord and pray. And I think that's the thing. Pray before, pray during, pray after, and then do all the other things that falls under the definition of the Lord helps those who help themselves.
True that. No finer words could be into than the ones you just used. So
amen.
Amen to that.
Thus endeth the sermon. But Don, it's been a pleasure being on with you tonight, as usual. And hopefully we gave people a good kick in the keister for the rest of the time. Friday, Sunny will be on, and she's going to have at least, as our first two guests in 15-minute segments each. First, Will Lathrop, Attorney General candidate on the Republicans.
All right.
Dennis Linthicum, Secretary of State candidate. So that'll be at 6:15. I think we're trying to get Brian Boquist, the Treasurer candidate, at 6:30. And so you will have a great show on Friday, hosted by Sunny. And then we will probably try to make sure these shows are available and seen by people who are in the undecided voter category for the weekend.
We'll do what we can.
Yes, sir. We will. Anyway, well, again, it's been a pleasure, Don. Thank you to everyone who watched, and share this show far and wide. It is. We want it to be the worst kept secret on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and get the word out there, and on YouTube while they still let us. And we know it can make a difference. So thanks, everyone, and tune in to